porcelain shattered against marble. A scream followed, high, furious, desperate. The head nanny stormed through the glass hallway, apron half torn, muttering, "I quit!" That boy's unreachable. Her heels clicked like gunfire as the butler trailed after, stammering apologies. At the far end of the dining room sat Ethan Hale, 10 years old, hands folded, face unreadable. The billionaire's deaf son. Since his mother died 2 years ago, sound had faded to a muffled world. The doctors called it progressive loss. The house called it disobedience. Silent while chaos raged around him. The butler hissed, "Don't just sit there, look what you've done." But Ethan didn't move. He just tapped his fingers against the mahogany table. Once, twice, again, tap, tap, each rhythm precise, like he was calling someone. Anyone who could actually hear. From the corner, Clara Jones, the maid, froze mid-sweep. No one noticed her. They rarely did. But she recognized that rhythm. Her late brother used to do the same when words failed. She stepped closer, heart racing, and signed a single word. "Hello." Ethan stopped tapping. His eyes widened. Then he signed back, hesitant, trembling. The butler scoffed, "He's just playing." Clara blinked, breath caught, because she understood exactly what he said. "You see me? 7 weeks, 5 nannies, 1 boy trapped in silence until someone finally listened. This is Black Stories, where the pain of prejudice is told and justice always finds its voice. If you believe listening is louder than money, tap like and subscribe, because in the next minutes you'll see how a black maid's hand said, "I see you," and an empire built on silence finally had to hear. Before she ever stood in that mansion, Clara Jones had already learned what silence could take from a person. Her brother Samuel lost his hearing at 6. Their mother couldn't afford specialists, so Clara became his interpreter, his voice, his world. Every night after her shifts at the diner, she'd sit by the flickering bulb in their tiny apartment, tracing letters into Samuel's palm until he smiled again. When he passed from pneumonia at 15, she'd promised herself, "I'll never stop listening, even when the world does." That promise followed her everywhere, through layoffs, eviction notices, and the morning she answered an agency ad titled, "Discreet Housekeeper Needed, High Security Clearance." The Hale estate felt less like a home and more like a museum for people who forgot how to feel. Everything gleamed, but nothing lived. The staff spoke in whispers. "You'll keep to the West Wing," the head maid, Evelyn Carter, said, crisp and cold. "No direct contact with the boy." The last girl thought she could help. "She's gone now." Clara nodded, eyes down. She needed this job. Her daughter's school fees were overdue. But the first time she saw Ethan Hale, sitting alone in the dining hall, she felt something crack, not pity, recognition. His small hands fluttered under the table like trapped birds, forming half signs he didn't expect anyone to notice. Half-remembered classroom signs, all nouns and no bridges. Language without permission. She pretended to dust nearby, just to see if he'd look up. He didn't. But when his toy car fell, she instinctively signed, "Careful," one hand sweeping under the other like a wave. He froze, eyes locked on her hands. Then, slowly, almost afraid to believe it, he repeated the motion back. From the corner, the butler frowned. "Miss Jones, he doesn't understand those gestures. Don't confuse him." Clara bowed her head. "Yes, sir." But when she turned away, Ethan tapped the table twice. Tap, tap. A thank you in rhythm. The same pattern from earlier. That night, alone in the service quarters, Clara stared at the ceiling, tears slipping into her hair. For years, she'd been invisible, to employers, to neighbors, to systems that decided who mattered. But now, in a house full of people with everything, it was a child who couldn't hear who finally saw her. The next morning she arrived early. As she polished the silver, Ethan watched from the stairs. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She just raised her hand, shaped the sign for good morning. He grinned, the first smile anyone in that house had seen from him in months. Down the hall, Evelyn saw the exchange and froze mid-step. Her voice turned to ice. "Miss Jones, step into my office after breakfast." The silence that followed wasn't peaceful anymore. It was a warning. Because in that mansion, kindness wasn't just rare, it was dangerous. The Hale mansion didn't run like a home. It ran like a corporation. Every clock ticked the same. Every step had a policy. Even the air felt managed. Staff moved in silent choreography. Maids in gray, butlers in black, gardeners ghosting through hedges trimmed into perfect squares. Mistakes weren't corrected. They were erased. At the top of that quiet pyramid stood Evelyn Carter, head maid and self-appointed gatekeeper of perfection. Her smile never reached her eyes. Her orders did. "Miss Jones," she said on Clara's second day, voice sharp enough to slice porcelain. "We clean, we don't converse, especially with the child." Clara kept her tone polite. "Understood." Evelyn's gaze lingered a second too long, measuring skin, posture, accent. This household values discipline over sentiment. Order was the only thing that ever kept her employable. Mercy never paid her rent. She looked Clara up and down, then added, softer, colder. "Remember your lane." Every 40 seconds, the mansion reminded Clara of what she wasn't supposed to be. Visible. She learned that Ethan's mother had died 2 years ago. Since then, every nanny quit or was fired for incompetence. The official reason? The boy won't cooperate. Unofficially, no one could stand Richard Hale's temper when his son refused to speak. The billionaire appeared rarely but left trails of control behind. Notes in marble hallways. Meeting. Silence required. To him, Ethan's silence wasn't grief. It was defiance. He'd spent millions on behavioral specialists, consultants, private clinics, all diagnosing the boy as unmotivated. Each failure only hardened his certainty. My son is choosing this. During dinner service one night, the room gleamed with cold wealth, silver domes, crystal stems, the quiet hum of money pretending to be manners. Ethan sat beside his father, trying to mimic the rhythm of the forks. Then, clatter. A fork slipped from his hand, crashing against the tile. The sound shattered the order. Richard's jaw tightened. Evelyn flinched. The butler whispered, "Not again." Ethan froze, eyes wide, chest heaving in silent panic. Clara stepped forward before she could think. She signed softly. "It's okay. 3 simple motions." Ethan blinked, then smiled. Small, fragile, the kind that doesn't know if it's allowed. The entire table paused. Richard glanced up, confused. "What did she just do?" Evelyn answered too fast. "Nothing, sir." She'll be reminded of her place. Dinner resumed, but the air stayed cracked. Later that night, Evelyn cornered her in the silver room. "Don't overstep again," she hissed. "You're here to polish, not to raise heirs. You start thinking otherwise, you'll find yourself replaced." Her tone carried more than authority. It carried history, the kind that still expected Clara to bow. But Ethan's smile had already changed something. The next morning, she found 3 soft taps on the table where he ate breakfast. 3 taps meant thank you. Later, when she turned to leave, she heard 2. His way of saying stay. For the first time, the silence in that mansion didn't feel like power. It felt like waiting. And everyone inside could feel it. Something unspoken was beginning to rise, quiet as breath, unstoppable as truth. The garden looked like perfection carved from money. White tablecloths fluttered under marble statues. Champagne glasses glinted in the noon light. Inside it all, Ethan Hale sat stiff beside a plate of untouched fruit, his tiny shoulders drawn tight. To everyone else, the luncheon was an event. To him, it was a war zone made of sound and light. The first flash hit like lightning. Then another. Then the orchestra struck its opening note, violins slicing through the air. Ethan's fork clattered. His breath hitched. His hands flew to his ears. He began to sign frantically, fingers trembling. Words no one understood. Guests froze mid-conversation. The PR manager whispered, "He's doing it again." A woman muttered, "Poor boy." Another said, "He needs discipline, not pity." At the far edge of the terrace, Clara Jones set down her tray. Her instincts kicked in before permission could stop her. She crossed the manicured lawn, ignoring Evelyn's hissed, "Don't you dare!" Clara knelt beside him. Her voice was steady, her hands graceful. "Breathe," she signed. "You're safe." 2 more gestures. Safe, with me. A tiny bridge built in daylight. 1 breath, then another. Ethan's fists loosened, his eyes focused. The panic melted from his face. The crowd stared, whispering. The music stumbled to a halt. On the balcony above, Richard Hale lowered his champagne, eyes narrowing. The billionaire rarely looked down on anyone. He expected them to look up. But now, in front of his elite guests and flashing cameras, a maid had done what specialists, doctors, and tutors couldn't. He moved before anyone could stop him. Each step down the staircase landed like a verdict. The air changed. Guests straightened. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Richard stopped beside Clara, his shadow spilling across the boy she was still calming. "Who authorized you," he said evenly, "to speak to my son?" Clara rose slowly, spine straight. "No one, sir," she said, "but someone had to listen." The words hung there, simple, impossible. Evelyn rushed in, voice sharp. "She's overstepped again, sir." "She's been warned." Richard's jaw tightened. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. "You're dismissed." "Pack your things." Gasps rippled through the garden. The journalist's lenses clicked faster, like vultures catching the scent of scandal. Clara turned to Ethan. He was shaking his head, eyes wide, hands trembling. Then, bang! His small fist hit the table, once, twice, then a third, clean strike. 3 deliberate knocks. The guests flinched. Evelyn hissed, "Ethan, stop that!" But Clara understood. It was their code. 3 taps, thank you. She knelt one last time, ignoring the stares, and signed quietly. "I'll come back." He nodded once. Silent. Certain. Guards appeared at the edge of the lawn. Evelyn whispered something to them. They hesitated, unsure who they were protecting. As Clara walked away, the guests' whispers followed like falling glass. Who was she? She calmed him. Why fire her? Up on the balcony, Richard turned his back to the scene, the perfect image of control. But Ethan's eyes were fixed on the gate where Clara disappeared. And for the first time since his mother's death, the boy made a sound. Not a word. A low, broken hum, half sob, half protest, carrying through the marble and the money like a crack in the facade. The city bus rattled down the darkened road, headlights cutting through drizzle. Clara sat by the window, her reflection warped in the glass. Her apron still smelled of bleach and garden roses, the scent of humiliation. She told herself to breathe, to move on, to let it go. But she couldn't. Because the last thing Ethan had tapped before she left wasn't random. Tap, tap, tap. 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 Tap, tap, tap. A rhythm burned into her mind like static. Her brother Samuel had taught her Morse code as a game when they were kids. He used to say, "Silence doesn't mean nothing. It means someone's waiting to be heard." Ethan hadn't chosen random. He'd matched the exact tempo she'd used at the table 2 days before. He was answering her, not the room. Clara grabbed her notepad and scribbled the pattern out. Her hand shook as she decoded. HELPME-THEYRELYING. Her chest went cold. The city outside blurred. The noise, the rain, the exhaustion, it all fell away. Only the boy's voice, hidden in rhythm, remained. By dawn, Clara was back at the gates of Hale Manor, hood drawn low, heart pounding. She didn't ring the bell. She knew the routines. Guards shift at 7, deliveries at 8. She slipped through the service entrance she'd cleaned 100 times. The house still slept. Silence hung thick, unnatural. She crept toward the study, the one Evelyn guarded like a vault. Voices drifted through the crack in the door. "Do you realize what you're suggesting?" Evelyn hissed. The other voice, clipped, male, impatient, was Dr. Malcolm, the estate physician. "I'm suggesting the truth. That child didn't lose his hearing from genetics or trauma. It was the behavioral compliance regimen, off-label sedatives layered with ototoxic meds. The combination damaged his auditory nerve. You overstepped, and now the boy's paying for it." "Watch your tone," Evelyn snapped. "We followed orders." Mr. Hale wanted his son fixed before the merger. Public sympathy doesn't raise stock value. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. She felt her stomach twist. The doctor lowered his voice. "He's deaf because they couldn't stand the shame of a boy who wouldn't talk." Evelyn exhaled, cold and brittle. "Then keep your mouth shut." "You like your salary, don't you?" Clara had hit record on the tiny device she'd brought, a second-hand voice recorder Samuel once used for sign language lessons. So she has every word on record. She set the recorder beside the desk clock. Timestamp visible in frame. Footsteps approached. She ducked behind the doorframe, heart hammering as Evelyn swept past, muttering about the Maid problem and damage control. When the corridor cleared, Clara slipped inside. Papers were scattered across the desk. Medical reports, progress notes, the word behavioral non-compliance circled in red ink. Then she looked up and froze. Through the glass doors of the conservatory, Ethan stood watching her. Barefoot, pajamas wrinkled. His small hands trembled as he signed, slow but deliberate. "They think I'm broken." The soundless sentence hit harder than any scream. Clara crossed the room in 3 steps and knelt before him. Tears blurred her vision, but her hands stayed steady. She signed back. "You're not broken." You were silenced. His lip quivered. Then he signed something else. Small, precise. "You came back." Clara nodded. "And I'm not leaving until you're free." Behind them, the grandfather clock struck 6, each chime a countdown. Because now, the truth wasn't just a secret. It was evidence. And in a house built on control, the first crack had just split the foundation. The Hale mansion had never glowed brighter. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, strings playing too perfectly to feel alive. Outside, black cars lined the circular drive, engines humming with the weight of money and secrets. It was merger night, the evening Richard Hale would unveil his next billion-dollar expansion to investors, donors, and cameras. Every room pulsed with ego and anticipation. And at the back door, in the servants' corridor that smelled of lemon polish and history, Clara Jones slipped in unseen. Her heart beat in rhythm with the recorder in her pocket. The one holding Evelyn's confession, the doctor's guilt, the truth. She moved fast and silent through the halls she used to clean, ghosting past guards distracted by applause. Every portrait seemed to watch her. Every chandelier reflected her fear. In the AV alcove, the rehearsal laptop still sat unlocked. She slid in a read-only thumb drive set to autoplay captions on Connect. One cable, one keystroke, and the house system listened for once. She reached the ballroom just as Richard took the stage. Spotlights carved his outline in gold. "Tonight," he declared, "we celebrate progress, our company's new dawn built on innovation, integrity, and family." The word family nearly choked her. Ethan sat beside him, small in a suit too stiff for comfort, his eyes lowered to the floor. He hadn't smiled once. At the room's edge, Evelyn spotted Clara and went pale. "You don't belong here," she hissed, moving fast. "Security will escort you out." Clara's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. She looked Richard in the eye. "Not before you hear your son." Heads turned, conversations fractured. "Excuse me?" Richard's voice boomed across the mic. Clara stepped forward through the sea of gowns and flashbulbs. "You say this night is about integrity. Let's start with your own house." Gasps rippled. Evelyn tried to grab her arm. Clara shook her off and kept walking. The music had stopped. Ethan looked up. Confusion, then recognition. His hands twitched toward her. Clara signed to him, calm, deliberate. "Tell them." The boy froze. His lips parted. Cameras clicked. 100 elite guests leaned forward, whispering. Then, trembling but steady, Ethan stood. He began to sign. Slowly at first, then faster, tears streaking down his cheeks. "You all talk. No one listens. I lost my hearing because of lies, silence. Utter, perfect silence." And then the translation appeared behind him, glowing across the ballroom screen. Gasps exploded. Someone whispered, "How?" Because Clara, while slipping in, had connected her phone to the presentation system. The projector mirrored from a read-only drive, metadata and timestamps displayed in the corner. Her translation app mirrored every sign onto the projector in real time. "You all talk. No one listens. I lost my hearing because of lies." The text repeated, in white on black, across Richard Hale's corporate logo. He spun toward the tech booth. "Turn that off." Too late. The next file auto-played. From the speakers came Evelyn's voice, sharp, panicked. "We followed orders." Mr. Hale wanted his son fixed before the merger. The room detonated. Investors shouted. Reporters lifted phones. Evelyn's face drained of color. Richard's mask cracked. This is fabricated." But the recording kept playing. The doctor's voice next. "He's deaf because they couldn't stand the shame of a boy who wouldn't talk." Gasps turned to outrage. Cameras flashed like lightning. The translator projected Ethan's last words again. "You tried to fix me. You broke me." Ethan turned to his father, signing with trembling fury. "You never listened." She did. Richard stumbled forward, whispering, "Son!" But Ethan stepped back. Clara put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "They're listening now." "I'm not your fixer," she told Richard without looking up. "I'm his ally." The reporters surged. Microphones shouted questions. The PR staff scrambled. Evelyn fled the room. Richard's empire, built on silence, was collapsing under noise. And in the chaos, one quiet truth rose above the shouts. A child's voice that didn't need sound to be heard. As security rushed toward them, Clara leaned down and whispered, "You did it." Ethan smiled faintly. A small, defiant miracle. Above them, the projector froze on one final frame. Integrity begins with truth. Clara touched the table twice. Tap, tap. Ethan answered with 3 thank you. And for the first time in years, the Hale mansion was full of something real, not power, not order, but justice. The next morning, the headlines hit like thunder. Billionaire hid son's disability to protect merger. Maid exposes Hale empire cover-up. The maid who heard what no one else did. Clips of the gala flooded every screen. Ethan signing, the words glowing across the projector. Richard Hale's stunned face under the chandelier light. Every network dissected it. Every talk show replayed the moment frame by frame. And for the first time in years, the world didn't see a defective child. They saw a truth silenced and finally spoken. By noon, Hale's board issued a statement. Richard Hale has been suspended pending a full investigation into ethical misconduct and child endangerment. Stock prices plummeted 27% by close of market. 2 directors resigned. A 3rd turned state's witness. Hale surrendered chairmanship pending the inquiry. Cameras camped outside the estate gates. Reporters shouted for comment. Evelyn Carter's car was seen speeding from the mansion before sunrise. Her resignation effective immediately. But by evening, her face was on the news, too. Arrested after Clara's recording went viral in full. The doctor turned himself in a day later, citing moral exhaustion. He confessed everything: the procedure, the falsified reports, the hush payments. The investigation widened to include board members and PR consultants who'd helped bury the scandal. For Clara, the chaos was surreal. She hadn't meant to start a revolution. She'd meant to help a child breathe again. Her small apartment became a sanctuary for microphones and camera crews. A single lamp, a humble kitchen table, and the woman whose compassion had undone an empire. Every interview began the same way. "Why did you risk everything?" Clara always answered the same. "Because silence shouldn't hurt." Weeks passed. The storm began to settle. The mansion went dark. Shutters closed, fountains dry. Then, one rainy afternoon, a knock came at Clara's door. When she opened it, Richard Hale stood there. Not the sculpted billionaire from the billboards, but a man stripped bare. His tailored coat hung loose. His eyes were red, hollow, human. He didn't come with cameras or lawyers, just a folded envelope and a small notebook in his hand. His cufflinks were mismatched. First time she'd seen him imperfect. "You exposed me," he said quietly. Clara met his gaze without flinching. "No, I freed your son." He looked away, then nodded. Slowly. "You're right." He hesitated, then opened the notebook. Inside were scribbles, uneven, shaky hand signs drawn beside written words. "Thank you. Sorry. I'm learning." Clara blinked, caught off guard. "I keep replaying that night," Richard said softly. Everyone was talking. But he was the only one who ever tried to be heard. I just never listened. There was no defense in his voice, no arrogance, only a man who finally realized what all his power couldn't buy: understanding. He took a breath. "Teach me." The next scene unfolded like quiet poetry. A small community center. Afternoon light through dusty windows. Richard sat across from his son at a folding table, sleeves rolled up. No cameras in sight. Clara stood between them, patient, steady. Ethan signed slowly. "Hello?" Richard fumbled, fingers awkward, eyes glancing at Clara. She corrected him gently. "No, slower. Let your hands listen before they speak." He tried again. "Hello." Ethan's lips curved, his first genuine smile at his father, in years. Richard exhaled. Not in triumph, in humility. Clara stepped back, watching, her voice a whisper. "That's it." "You're hearing him." For once, the silence in the room wasn't painful. It was sacred. Outside, through the window, city noise carried faintly, the world still spinning fast. But in that small, unpolished space, time slowed, because a man who once silenced the world's most fragile voice had finally learned what it meant to listen. 6 months later, the mansion that once whispered with secrets stood reborn. The marble floors were the same, but the energy was different, lighter, human. Reporters and guests gathered under a new banner stretched across the gates. The Hale Institute for Deaf Empowerment. And beneath it, in smaller gold letters, "Listening is the first act of love." Clara adjusted a child's collar by the stage steps, laughing softly as Ethan ran circles around her, signing jokes to a group of volunteers. He'd changed. Freer, more alive. The walls that once trapped him now echoed with children's laughter, hands moving in bright, joyful rhythm. A few feet away, Richard Hale stood alone in a dark suit, holding a paper he'd rewritten a dozen times. The same cameras that once captured his downfall were now waiting for him to speak. He didn't look like a mogul anymore. He looked like a father. When the crowd quieted, Richard stepped up to the microphone. His voice, though steady, carried the weight of someone who had learned to feel again. "There was a time," he began, "when I believed power meant control. That silence meant peace. That my son's quiet was something to fix." He looked toward Ethan, who waved back, grinning. "I was wrong." He paused, letting the words settle. "My son's first teacher wasn't in any resume pile." She was polishing the floor. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Clara's eyes glistened. Richard turned to her directly. "Clara Jones, you didn't just save my son's voice, you gave him back his world." Applause broke through like sunlight. He smiled faintly. "This institute is not a monument to my name. It's a promise that no child will ever be called broken for how they speak, or how they don't." Cameras flashed. Journalists leaned forward. But for once, Richard Hale wasn't performing. He was confessing. Ethan ran up to the stage, tugging at his father's sleeve, signing something quick. Richard looked to Clara for help. She smiled. He said, "Hurry up, Dad." "It's my turn." Laughter spread through the crowd. Richard stepped aside. Ethan climbed onto the podium, faced the audience of children, parents, and teachers, then lifted his hands and signed with bold, confident motion. "I see you. Every child in the crowd signed it back, dozens of small hands mirroring his movement in unison. I see you. Clara stood among them, her eyes wet, her heart steady. She looked around the room, at the faces that once belonged to silence, now illuminated with pride. Then, in the final shot, the scene shifted to the classroom inside the institute. Afternoon light spilled through wide windows. Clara stood at the front, guiding a circle of children through sign practice. Their hands rose together, fluid and bright. One final phrase filled the air, silent but resounding. I see you. Outside, the sign over the gate shimmered in the breeze. The Hale Institute, founded by a father, led by a listener. And for the first time in that house's long, haunted history, silence didn't mean distance, it meant understanding. Soft piano hums beneath the closing montage, sunlight spilling across the Hale Institute's courtyard, children laughing, their hands moving in bright rhythm as they sign to one another. Ethan kneels beside a younger girl, patiently teaching her how to spell her name with his hands. In the doorway, Richard Hale watches, no longer the untouchable billionaire, just a father learning to listen. And beside him, Clara Jones smiles quietly, her eyes full of peace. She was hired to clean floors, but she cleaned a conscience. In a house built on silence, she taught them that listening is louder than money. The camera drifts through the hall, past portraits of Clara and Ethan on the wall, founding director, founding student. Every hand has a voice. The sunlight grows warmer, golden, soft on their faces as the children turn towards the camera and sign one phrase together. I see you. Clara signs it back. Because what started as a job became a movement, and in the echoes of that mansion, where power once spoke over pain, compassion finally found its voice. This is Black Stories, where empathy breaks the walls that power builds. If this story moved you, like this video, share it and subscribe, and help more people remember what really heals the world. Because sometimes the bravest sound isn't a word at all. It's the moment a hand says, I see you, and someone finally answers,